As my daughter was getting ready for school this morning, she said, "It's Canada Day."
Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
I said, "I don't celebrate Canada Day." She said, "Neither do I." Now that took me back a little bit, so I asked her, "Why not?" She said, "Canada doesn't even know how to treat their native population." Now, it's hard to argue with a teenager.
Let's not bicker and argue about who killed who.
Especially when they're right. I said, "I guess that's a good enough reason." "I don't, because it's Memorial Day." She said, "Did you see my bracelet?" She held it up and said,
"They're forget-me-nots."
Now, don't get me wrong. It's not that I'm anti-Canadian or anything. My heart swells up with pride when Canada wins the bronze at the Olympics. But we're not like our neighbours to the south. We're not really the flag-waving type in Canada. Well, except maybe on Canada Day. I come from Newfoundland. We're Canada's youngest province. We didn't join Canada until 1949. My parents weren't even born Canadian. They were born as Newfoundlanders. And in Newfoundland, Canada Day, or should I say, July 1st, means something very different. July 1st is Memorial Day. During the First World War, Newfoundland was not part of Canada. Newfoundland was like its own country. It was a self-governing realm of the British Empire with dominion status. This small nation did not have its own standing army. On the evening of August the 4th, 1914, Walter Davidson, the governor of Newfoundland, received a cable informing him that Britain was at war. As a colony, Newfoundland officially entered the war the very moment that Britain did. Davidson reacted quickly. On August 8th, he wired London to say that Newfoundland and Labrador would raise 500 men for land service and 1,000 men for naval service. Prime Minister Patrick Morris supported this decision without calling the legislature together. After a month of training, the first 500, also known as the Blue Puttees, were ready to head overseas. On October 3rd, 1914, they marched from their training camp to board the SS Florizel, a steamer and sealing vessel that had been converted into a troop ship. They were cheered on by a large gathering of citizens. The next day, the troops began their journey overseas. This is the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, then the Dominion of Newfoundland. It's 1.5 times the size of the UK. But in 1914, the population was around 250,000, and it was pretty spread out. Most men were away at the Labrador fishery and could not afford to go away to fight on some foreign shore. But surprisingly, many did. Most came from St. John's. By war's end, approximately 12,000 Newfoundlanders and Labradorians enlisted to serve. And remember, that's from a population of less than 250,000. Shortly after the outbreak of the First World War, more members of the Newfoundland Regiment left St. John's and traveled across the Atlantic Ocean to join the first 500. They did further training in Scotland and England, and then deployed to Gallipoli, Egypt, and finally, the Western Front. July 1st, 1916, marked the first day of the Battle of the Somme, an offensive against Germany by British and French forces on both sides of the River Somme in France. The village of Beaumont-Hamel was just behind German lines. The offensive started at 6 a.m. with an hour-long artillery bombardment of German positions. 7:20, 10 minutes before 0 hour, 18,000 kilograms of explosives were detonated in a tunnel dug under the Hawthorne Ridge Redoubt, an important German stronghold west of the village. The explosion alerted the Germans to the attack and gave them time to man their defenses and arm their weapons. The Newfoundland Regiment and the rest of the 88th Brigade waited back in St. John's Road, the reserve trench with dugouts that protected them against German shells. The Newfoundlanders' mission was to go forward, but they walked into a complete disaster. At 8:45, the Newfoundland Regiment was ordered to move on the enemy, but the trenches were choked with dead and wounded from 2 earlier waves of attack. So the Newfoundlanders didn't use the trenches. They got up on top and simply walked over open ground. Some 780 men swarmed over the battlefield, weaving their way through the zigzag gaps in the British wire before reaching no man's land. They were the only ones moving on the battlefield, and they were silhouetted on the horizon. Every German gun in the area was trained on them. Machine guns cut through the Newfoundlanders like cordwood. Many fell before reaching their own front line. A few made it to a clump of shell-blasted trees where the Danger Tree Memorial stands today. But most were struck by guns trained on the gaps in the wire. The Newfoundland Regiment was decimated in a matter of minutes. The Royal Newfoundland Regiment has a storied past, but of all the stories, none is as captivating or as tragic as its advance during the Battle of the Somme on July the 1st, 1916. Over 100 years later, the event still resonates deeply with Newfoundlanders. Every July the 1st, while the rest of Canada celebrates the birth of a nation, Newfoundlanders mourn their losses in the Great War, and especially those at Beaumont Hamel. Yes, on Canada Day, the flag is lowered to half-mast, and we gather here at the Newfoundland National War Memorial. It was officially unveiled on July the 1st, 1924, by Field Marshal Douglas Haig, former Commander-in-Chief of the British forces during the First World War. Today, on the 100th anniversary of the unveiling of the War Memorial, the remains of an unknown soldier from what was then known as the Dominion of Newfoundland was entombed on the plateau of the Newfoundland National War Memorial. The remains repatriated from northern France represent all those Newfoundlanders and Labradorians who lost their lives in conflict, especially those with no known graves. More than 1,700 tragically lost their lives, and more than 800 of those have no known grave. On July 1st, 1917, 1 year after the tragic battle, Newfoundland chose the blue forget-me-not flower as the flower to wear every July 1st on Memorial Day. to remember those brave soldiers who died.
Their forget-me-nots.
But it is also the only other day that the familiar poppy is worn. In the end, the issue of the cost of the war to the colony would be one that proved significant to its future. The government of Newfoundland contributed over $15 million to the war effort. This amount grew to over $38 million by the 1930s, when pensions and interest on war loans were included. The ultimate result was the colony's loss of independence and self-government in 1934.